Hello, 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 and welcome back, everybody, to another episode of No Bull Sports. No Bull Sports. Just wanted to reiterate that for everybody that used to watch me on No Bull Sports without this H right there at the bottom. Made a little bit of a name change. Make sure you look for that in the YouTube streams as well as the Twitter sphere. Um, Today, I have on a couple of guests. I have two. They've known each other for a very long time. I believe their whole lives. They're brothers. New friend of mine, Brian Shannon, I met recently. Met him at a food and beverage establishment. Both of us were just having our own little Saturday mornings and struck up a conversation that turned into about an hour hanging out, talking sports. And I said, "You need to come on, sir." And then he said his brother's even more of a sports nut. So we're going to have the both of them on here. And they're huge trash talkers, love to play golf. So, of course, this is the place for them to come and do their thing. So, without any further ado, Mr. Shawn and Brian Shannon, thank you very much for coming on to the show today, fellas.
How you doing, Brian? Great to be here.
Good.
Yep, happy to be here, Brian.
All right. All right. So, one of the things, real quick, I wanted to ask Brian, what's the wheel in quotes? What Brian wheel? What's that?
I knew that would come up. That nickname started in high school, and as my three other brothers, we all went to the same high school, and my nickname was Wheel, and then my brother Shawn, a lot of his friends started calling him Wheel, and then my youngest brother Tom, who was in high school, I'd already graduated, he became Wheel. So, I always say I'm the original Wheel. That's my nickname. The other brothers kind of copied it. And more people, Brian, probably know me as Wheel, like my friends. I'm never called Brian. I'm just called Wheel. It caught on in college. I went away to college, but I had a couple friends from Baltimore come up and visit me, and around my college friends, they all just kept calling me Wheel. So all my college buddies started calling me Wheel. So
I know how that goes.
That's the name.
Yep. I used to be, Spudsy was one of my old nicknames. I was like, that just traveled with me all the way to Salisbury. And it was the same thing. Had some buddies there, and everybody's like, "You're Spudsy. Now you're Spudsy." But Shawn, thank you for coming on today. I didn't get to talk to you much other than just before the show. Wanted to, just for everybody out there listening, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are the sports nut that you are.
Well, I'm glad you included me because when Brian told me about him running into you in the bar and how you were doing a podcast, like I said earlier when we were talking, if I had a dream job, I would have been a sports talk radio host. But our sports, I think my love for sports as well as probably Brian's, but it all started in a family where our father was into sports. Our father and his brothers every Saturday and Sunday would, at 7:00 in the morning, would go down and play tennis, doubles tennis, and him and his brothers and even our aunt were huge Notre Dame football fans and Baltimore Colt fans and Oriole fans. So, and then our oldest brother, Neil, was really a sports nut. And so just, sports was everywhere. Now, we didn't have the internet back then, but we, Saturday games, game of the week on NBC with Kurt Gowdy and Tony Kubek, and basketball. Basketball, I would say, is all the four brothers' favorite sports. Right. Brian was a very good basketball player. Our brother Neil, again, who was the oldest, he was the first one to go to the high school that we went to. He was a 3-sport star. And then our brother Tom was a very good basketball player. Now, Tom and Brian are 6'6", and my brother Neil, our brother Neil, is like 6'3", and I'm barely 6 foot. So, as far as basketball is concerned, I tell these guys, I said, look, if I had your height, I would have been in the NBA. that didn't pan out. So anyway, I'm just a huge sports fan. I would read the sports page front to back. My brother Neil, again, back to our brother Neil, there was a board game, and I think he still plays it, but back when I was in grade school, there was a board game called Stratomatic, and you literally would roll dice and you could play a real game. These cards were figured, the cards were I'm going to say calculated or figured on the previous season's statistics,
Right.
and they were pretty realistic. And I mean, there was a time like back in the 60s and 70s when I was in my, in my teenage years. I mean, because of that game and because of just reading box scores and stuff like that, I could have named every starting player on every team in baseball at every position. So I'm a sports nut. I'm guilty as charged.
Gotta love it. That's I was the same way with the.
I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
Brian.
I just wanted to follow up, Brian. Stratomatic, it was a computerized, calculated game, and like you would have the players. I'm going back, but Rod Carew, Tony, or Willie McCovey. You would have every starting lineup in every position on every team, and you would match one against the other. And so the odds of someone like Reggie Jackson hitting a home run, that's all calculated in this. And Shawn and my brother Neil really enjoyed that game. And I'm even going to say, and I hope I'm representing this correctly, our brother Neil actually has won national tournaments in like those Stratomatic leagues, where you draft players and so on and so forth. So there is some strategy involved.
I was Googling it on the side here just to, get some information on it. So it's almost like a fantasy sports, like a paper version of it. Cause
Exactly.
it's all numbers based, right?
It was rotisserie baseball before rotisserie baseball, before, what do they call it now? What are the leagues that I'm drawing a blank? All the football leagues and the
fantasy leagues.
Yeah, it was basically, you could do that every day, back before there was fantasy baseball or fantasy football, and now there's fantasy golf, fantasy everything. But yes, it's a good analogy. It was like you could have your own fantasy league every day all it took was there was some, like Brian said, every player in baseball had a card, and then you had dice. So like an example, if Willie McCovey let's say the year before, hit 50 home runs, you would roll one dice that, so there was columns 1, 2, and 3, and you'd roll one dice for which column, and then there was 2 dice for 1 through 12. So like, if you rolled a 3, and then the number 4, the number 5 or 6, Willie McCovey probably had a home run next to that number. So if you rolled a 3, 6, he'd hit a home run, but he struck out a lot. So if you rolled a 3, 2 or a 2, 9 or 10, he'd strike out. But the games were like it was incredibly realistic.
That's interesting. I'd never heard of it. After this I'm gonna research that a little bit more. But I do want to get to golf because
he would be a good guest if you ever really wanted to get in depth on that.
We'll have to talk on that because that's really piquing my interest. I was going to ask though about. So I mean, Shawn, you said you're the more avid golfer of the two. Do you mind letting us know what your handicap is and what how often you play?
Right now, my index is like a 9. It's been as low as a 4.
Okay.
I'm 63, so my games, my attention span is not as good as it used to be. I don't hit the ball as far as I used to. But
Brian agrees.
I'm a single-digit handicap, and I would say I'm a good player. I'm no longer I was never a great player, but I'm a good player. Our nephew Neil is a great player. He's like now he has 2 young daughters, and he's in his mid-40s, but he still hits the ball. He's 44, He's 5'9", 170 pounds soaking wet, but he's strong as anything. And he, it's nothing for, I'm not making this up. He can hit it 320, 330 off the tee, and
Yep.
great iron game, good putter. So he's the player in the family.
Yeah. So like when you're watching him, like and he's teeing off, he's got 50, 60 yards on everybody. Like, kind of explain to the newer golfers out there, like how much of an advantage, does that give a player, and like for what reasons technically does it give an advantage to a player?
Well, in my opinion, when you can hit the ball that far. Now, look, I play with a lot of guys that can hit the ball really far, but their iron game's no good or they can't putt. He's got the whole package. But it's a huge advantage. I go down to South Carolina because he lives in South Carolina now, and so does my daughter with my son-in-law, and our nephew Neil and my son-in-law Hayward are both. Neil's 44, Hayward's 38, 39, and they're both huge hitters. Huge. So when I play the same tee box as them, I'm 70, 80 yards behind them. And like on par fives, they can hit it in two, and I have no chance of doing that. So their distance is a huge advantage, but they also, Hayward's not as good as Neil, but the iron game, their iron games are solid. But I think all the young kids nowadays, whether it's they're bigger, they're stronger, the equipment's better, but it's just amazing how far these young guys hit the golf ball. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you see that on the tour. The tour averages, everybody's hitting at 300, 315. And, you're right. I got buddies that, they can hit that average, but they're not going to hit the greens in regulation anywhere close. Brian, do you back in your day, or do you still you're a big guy? Do you hit the ball pretty far when you connect, or what would you say when you do? What is your game that does work?
You can see my brother laughing. Somehow, Brian, the golf gene skipped me in the family. I can't figure it out, and it's frustrating because, my brother Tom would kill the ball. I always say though, the best place to have my brother Tom was 80 yards from the green, because he would chili dip a wedge or something,
Right.
But I just know for some reason I can't hit the ball far. I guess it's all with what they say, your rhythm. And and golf is a game of passion too. If you play once a week or once every 10 days, you're not going to get better. You got to practice. And you have to have your mechanics right. And I know my mechanics are not right. So, I'm have the same awful swing year in and year out. And it shows up in my scores. Some rounds I can, for me, play decently, and other rounds, it's just like, I'd rather be doing it. I'd rather be at the dentist than out on the golf course. But getting back to the, if you hit a drive and you have a wedge in your hand or a 9-iron, like when I hit a drive, I'm hitting a 4 or 5-iron on so many holes.
Right.
And it's a completely different game, because even, I have a much better chance hitting a 9-iron or wedge on the green than I do a 5-iron. And we were playing, I'll just tell you, one of my memories of my nephew is we were playing a 300-yard par 4, but it was up a hill, and it was at a club Shawn used to belong to. Well, my nephew Neil hits a 3-wood, 300-yard par 4, and he hits it to within, and I'm not exaggerating, 2 inches of the cup. And, I in my dreams, I could not hit a 300-yard drive, and he's hitting a 3-wood 300 yards and directly on line. I mean, it was close to being a hole-in-one. And It's just, whenever there's you go to these tournaments and you play Captain's Choice, and he can drive some par 4s, or a lot of times he's 20 yards off the green, and and then you get every player gets to hit their shot and see which shot's the best. And it's just it's great to have someone like that on your team. And he and I actually are partners when we play. My brothers Shawn and Tom in matches, and I really don't have to stress a whole lot because my nephew does the heavy lifting, and he's just
Yep.
that good of a player.
Brian, when those two are teammates, you use an analogy. Brian is like the guy that combined with Wilt Chamberlain for 102 points in Hershey, Pennsylvania that one night.
The point guard.
That's one of his favorite lines, Brian.
But me and Tom used to win all the time. Every year we go on a golf trip. But the last 3 years, it's just been embarrassing how bad they've beaten us. It's just not even close. Yeah, I don't think we've had a close match in 3 years. So they've done very well.
So, well, speaking about that, on Brian, on players that are on Brian's end, right? And I'm not saying guys that have played a while, but it's somebody's getting started, with golf. Kind of explain the patience needed to get good, regardless of who you are, because it's not something that if you're you can run fast and jump high, you're going to go into golf and be able to learn it quicker. Or is there anything to be said about athleticism with it, Shawn? I'll guess I'll direct that more to you. Like, for anybody that's starting off with golf, explain the patience aspect.
Well, the first thing you have to be extremely patient, which, my wife will tell you, Brian will tell you, anybody that knows me, I have zero patience.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, the first thing, if somebody wanted to take up golf, I mean, there's a lot of great athletes that can't play golf. I mean, there's a lot of guys that, baseball players will hit a curveball at 90 miles an hour. They can't hit a ball sitting still, and it's the most frustrating thing in the world. So I think it's proper technique, and it's like, I forget who said it, but practice doesn't make you perfect. Perfect practice makes you perfect. I think it might have been John Wooden. But I would go out if you really wanted to take up golf and you wanted to be good at it, I would take lessons right away and from somebody that knows what they're doing.
Yep.
Tell you how to swing. And then, like Brian says, if you want to be a good player, I mean, you got to practice a lot. I mean, the short game makes or breaks most competitive players. All the guys, all those pros can hit the ball 300 yards, but it's the guys at Augusta and all these majors where the greens are like so fast, they run it, 13, 14, 15 on the stint meter. It's just like the greens are, so the difference is who's a great putter, who has a great short game. The thing that amazes me about all the pros is, like, I dread it when I go in the sand because I don't know if I'm going to chunk one and leave it in the beach. I don't know if I'm going to hit an MX missile over the green into the other beach. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what I'm going to do. And if you watch those guys, sometimes they'll hit an errant shot and they'll be going towards a trap or the rough, and they're screaming, get in the trap because their sand game is so efficient, which is crazy to me, but that's why they make millions of dollars playing golf, and I still work.
Well, like I was going to ask too, that the stick, you said the stick meter, is that with the
stint?
That's with the speed of the green.
STINT. It basically measures the speed of the greens.
Right. Okay. I actually did not. I've heard of like a greens rating. I didn't know that's what it was called. So thank you.
Yeah.
So, like you said, guys that that's an interesting thing you said about how good players don't mind being in the sand, especially in a nice bunker, well kept bunkers.
Right.
Because we've all played at courses that kind of have rough bunkers. And nobody wants to deal with that. I guess like what is Brian? What is if you're in the sand, what happens there? What would you do in that instance? Like what are you just you're not like picking the ball up, are you? You're hacking away at the ball trying to get it out. Right?
I used to, and I'm not exaggerating, and Shawn may laugh, but I used to have a really good sand game. Not recently though. I mean, again, it's something you have to practice, but I had all the confidence in the world when I got in a bunker.
Yeah.
And I could chip out. Actually. And, I remember, we were playing with, actually he was a professional athlete in baseball, and he was a good golfer. And I was in the sand twice around the greens, and I got up and down, so which they say, saves par. Now I might have saved bogey, or whatever,
Yep.
but he goes, man, here's a guy in my handicap happens to be 19, which tells you I'm not very good. He goes, here's a 19 handicapper who has more sand saves than I do,
Mm-hmm.
So I used to be very good coming out of the bunker. I don't get intimidated by it.
Right.
And just to follow up, if I could, on Shawn, I played basketball, and fortunately, we all had good coaches when we were very young. And the same is with golf. If you don't have your fundamentals down,
Yeah.
it's going to be a disastrous. You're not going to get better. You got to get your form down. You got to get your movements down with swinging the club. And
Yep.
some people it comes natural to. I remember a story when we were younger, teenagers, where Shawn was hitting these plastic golf balls. Somebody was a golfer and brought them up as a present to him, an older fella. And Shawn was in our backyard just hitting these plastic balls. They don't go as far. They only go 20 yards. And I just thought, man, he's, and the good golfer said he has a natural swing. Well, some people have it and some don't.
Right.
And Shawn, I think from the very outset, could hit a golf ball really well.
Right.
And I can hit some shots really well.
Yeah.
Last week I almost holed out from 71 yards, but it was 2 inches from the stick. But that's few and far between where players like Shawn's caliber do that a couple times around.
So I think, Brian, and maybe to a lesser degree, but I have the same issue as you. Like, I mean, I grew up playing baseball, so I had that swing in me. I waited too long to get a lesson. So I've been playing golf for 8-9 years. I didn't get a lesson until about a year and a half ago. Immediately took, 5 strokes off my game within 10 rounds. Just based on just turning the grip a little bit, the takeaway. And I have, and you're a super tall guy. I'm not that tall, but I have spindly limbs. So it's, a lot more to control when I go up. I'm fighting to get back down into position, as they say, where Shawn, for example, probably has a natural straight take back, straight to the ball. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. We deal with the same thing, Brian. I'm a 16 handicap, so we should play together.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask guys, going into professional golf here a little bit. I think the big story recently, obviously, you have the FedEx Cup coming up, the playoffs, the 4 majors are done. Sorry, real quick, Shawn and Brian, who are your favorite? We'll start with Shawn. Who's your favorite golfer now? The favorite one you like to watch, and then who do you think is your favorite to win it all, or is it the same person?
My favorite golfer now, currently playing, is I would say is probably it's either Scotty Scheffler or probably number one would be Jordan Spieth. I just like the way the guys are great golfers. Both went to University of Texas, and but they both are like quality human beings. I mean, they're like there was a story a couple years ago where Jordan Spieth, two guys were giving a girl a hard time in the gallery, and he was actually playing in a tournament and went over and took time out of his game to basically put
Set
the
him
guys
straight.
in line and tell them that's not the way you should be acting around the young lady. So he's just a quality, you listen to his interviews, he's always positive. He's never blaming anybody or finding fault with his competitors. Same with Scotty Scheffler. I think the most talented golfer in the world is Rory McIlroy, but
Yeah.
for some reason he's won several FedEx Cups, but he hasn't won a major now, and I think like it's close to 10 years, which is incredible to think of, as good as he is. But those are probably the two. And I also like Brooks Koepka, but those I would say Scheffler and Spieth are my two favorite.
All right, Brian.
My lineup's pretty much the same. I like watching Brooks Koepka because he can crush the ball and he's so
Yeah.
talented. And when he's on, it's just he's like a machine. And he also, I think, has the killer instinct when it comes to majors. He seems to rise up to the occasion at the major golf tournaments. Think Rory McIlroy has incredible talent, and I was thinking the same thing when Shawn was talking. I think it's been 10 years since he won a major.
Yeah, I think it's
And then,
2014.
and obviously Dustin Johnson has tremendous talent. He's an athlete. In other areas, I mean, I see the guy dunk a basketball behind his head. So not only can he crush a golf ball, he's just got that.
Oh, DJ can dunk? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I saw it with my own eyes.
All right, yo.
He is like 6'4".
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but still, that's not. I
Right.
struggled. I struggled dunking. I could do it sometimes, but I'd have to be jumping real good that day. So it's not something everyone can do. But and then again, Jordan Spieth is just a quality human being. I don't see how someone could not like him. So
Right.
I'm happy when he's at the top of the leaderboard.
Yeah, you guys brought up Rory, both of you. He's always been interesting to watch because he's always right there. I feel like it's his I wouldn't even say his short game. I think his putting has kind of always held him back a little bit. He's never really been able to, if you watch like a Spieth, for example, when he was winning, he's draining putts everywhere. Koepka's another great putter when he's in the zone. I just feel like Rory's putter never gets to that elite level because he'll drive it out there, he'll put it there, put himself in position, and it's just down the stretch. I'm not saying he misses the gimmies, but he never seems to make that long killer putt. You guys agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think he lost he lost this year's U.S. Open to Wyndham Clark because of his putting. I mean, and again, like you're saying, he didn't miss a 3-footer, but it seemed like Saturday and Sunday, both days, he had quite a few of 6 to 10 footers, and he didn't make any of them.
Right.
So he makes and I think he lost by a stroke or two. So if he makes a couple of those, he's in a playoff. He makes 3 of them, he wins. So
Right.
I agree with you. His putting is his Achilles heel. It's like go back to our nephew Neil. He hits the ball well over 300 yards. Great iron game, great sand game, great short game. He's not a good putter, and I always kid him. I said, Neil, if you could putt, you'd be on the pro tour.
Yeah.
So putting is I think that's what differentiates the winners every weekend from the rest of the guys.
Right. I mean, Tiger. I mean, just an example. I mean, I want to touch on Tiger Woods with you guys a little bit. Just your guys' interpretation of when he came up and was dominating. I'm sure you guys in the '80s saw Jack Nicklaus towards the end of his career. In the '70s, when you were starting to watch golf, Shawn, were you watching golf when you were young, teenage years, Brian?
I was Jack Nicklaus. I was 14 years old. And, back then, if you were 14 and you liked golf, you were a dork. But I didn't care. And he was, I loved watching him on TV. And he still is, without a doubt. He's my all-time favorite athlete. And I love every sport. So he's right up there. He's probably at the top of the list, closely followed by Bill Walton and Frank Robinson, but Jack Nicklaus is my all-time favorite athlete.
Nice. What was back in those days? Was it? Tiger when he came on, he was hitting the ball. He had it all right, but he was also hitting it farther. It was Jack Nicklaus was also a long hitter. Was it that all inspiring, or was he like we were saying super clutch putting? I also heard that was his main tell was he was always amazing putter.
Well, it's funny because I'm going to say I lose track of time. I'm going to say 10 years ago on the Golf Channel, maybe 6 or 7, whatever. There was a show based on Tiger versus Jack, who's the greatest player of all time. And one of the arguments is Tiger was so much longer than Jack off the tee.
Right.
And I remember Ben Crenshaw, the guy was interviewing Ben Crenshaw, and Ben Crenshaw started laughing. And he's like, that's absurd. He said Jack hit the ball 290 with persimmon woods. So, I mean, the thing about it is those, you look at sports. I guess nowadays the argument in basketball is who's the greatest player? Is it Michael or LeBron? No, of course, I think it's Michael. But in golf, there's two guys. It's who's the greatest player ever? It's Jack or it's Tiger. There's no. Yep. If you bring a third guy into that conversation,
it's silly.
It's even worse than basketball because you could bring some other people into that conversation. I mean, Michael's the best in my opinion, but golf, it's Jack or it's Tiger. Period.
Yep. Yeah, like and did you guys also hear that Tiger was just recently brought onto the PGA Commission to help out? Like he's going to be I guess a member of their, board of directors or something. Live in PGA, they have their thing going on. Brian, is that something you've been following at all, or do you have a comment?
I saw the headline on Tiger. I think it was the first time in 27 years he's going to be on that commission for the PGA. I will say this: as far as live in the PGA, I don't follow golf as closely as I did, just because it looks like they made some type of agreement, and my brother would probably be able to tell you all the details of that better. But because it was fragmented, and some of the great players were playing on live, and some of the great players stayed with the PGA, and it just was, and Phil and Tiger, weren't in the mix as much.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't been following golf as much as I used to. If either Phil or Tiger, were in contention, I was, pretty much always watching it. And when I was younger, I watched it more, and I had Shawn loved Jack Nicklaus, and rightfully so. And Seve Ballesteros was like my favorite player. And maybe some people watching this have never heard of him. But he was creative, and he tried stuff that other golfers wouldn't dare try. And he seemed to be able to pull it off a lot. So, but I don't know how. Maybe you two can talk about how live and PGA, what they've resolved, and it seems like it's going to get back together, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, I just thought, like, as from my perspective, and it's not. I'm not going to feel sorry for multi-millionaires to a degree, but those guys that didn't could have easily taken the money to go there. A lot of them turned it down, and now doesn't seem to be. Well, it's been a back and forth, and I think that's why Tiger's being brought into the mix, is because they make a decision, they turn back on it. They make a decision to bring the live players back, but only if they allow them to punish them the way that they want to punish them for leaving in the first place. And it just seems like a hodgepodge of differing opinions. A lot of guys with a lot of money that don't want to agree to things, so that means that things are going to take a long time. Shawn, what are your thoughts on that?
No, there's a lot of animosity for sure.
Right.
I mean, Rory he's without a doubt the most outspoken one against the live tour. He's adamant about that. And he recently, I saw him, somebody was interviewing him a week or two ago, and he said, look, if the live tour was the only option to play golf, he says, I would retire. So I when they signed that, when you heard the news and they signed the merger or signed the agreement that they were live was going to join forces with the PGA, the first thing I said was exactly what you touched on, Brian, was what about the guys that stayed on the PGA tour and didn't get $200 million like Phil Mickelson, or didn't get $120 million like Dustin Johnson? How are you going to make it up to them? And I really have not heard any direct answer of how that's going to be done. I don't think it can be done. I mean, $200 million, and Dustin Johnson's getting 120, and Cam Smith got 120, and Koepka got 100, and I mean, you can't make that money up. It's not like the PGA is going to just start stroking checks for hundreds of millions of dollars. So,
Shawn, you think the players that got that kind of money will throw it in a pot and just divvy it up with the guys who didn't go?
That makes sense.
No. I don't think Phil Mickelson's given up any of his money. And quite frankly,
stock market.
Phil Mickelson was the one that drove the whole thing. I believe him and the Saudi Arabia, the PIF, or the whatever it's called, their fund of somebody says they have $750 billion in this fund. So they're going to get into other sports besides golf. But it's the old saying, money talks, and they got Phil Mickelson, and they gave him a lot of money, and they gave him $200 million. I read somewhere where they wanted to give Tiger $1 billion.
Yeah.
They wanted Jack Nicklaus. They were going to give Jack Nicklaus $750 million to be the commissioner instead of Greg Norman. So the PGA couldn't compete with that money.
Right. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know about the Jack Nicklaus instead of Greg Norman. That's I don't think Greg Norman would have felt about that.
They wanted Jack Nicklaus to be the commissioner,
right,
of LIV, and he turned them down. Tiger turned them down. And there are guys that, Rory, I think it's it's Rory is a traditionalist, and he didn't, and I don't know whether Rory had an issue with the fact that the money was coming from Saudi Arabia, and you can, a lot of people they call it dirty money, and, the social issues of the money,
right,
when there's so many issues over in Saudi Arabia for human rights and stuff. But, so I think it was a combination of some guys just traditionalists. They wanted to stay with the PGA Tour. They wanted the majors, but now it seems like all four majors have said the LIV guys can play in the majors. So I don't know. It's going to be curious. It's going to be. I'm interested to see what's going to happen, because the Ryder Cup is like a month away. Right. So I'm wondering who from the LIV Tour is going to play for the United States or Europe.
Right.
So that'll be interesting.
So speaking of Europe, we were discussing a story earlier before we came on the podcast of a time when you two were playing a little golf over there in Ireland, and I want to I'm just trying to think of who should start here and who should tell the story.
I'll start.
Brian
can go first. Brian can go
first.
So it was in 2007, and I believe we played 4 courses.
Okay.
And it also was in September, if I recall. And so we flew into Shannon Airport, and we rented a van and a car. And the first night we played at La Hinch, which is a small town on the water. And all these 4 courses just were like, world-class courses. All in the water, all in the ocean. Most of them had cliffs. I mean, just the scenery was spectacular. So we played La Hinch, then we went to, Shawn, did we go to Killarney, and was Ballybunion our second course? And then we played Watervale, and there was one other course that I can't remember.
Watervale was the last. I think it was La Hinch was first, Ballybunion was second, Trolley was our third course, and
right.
Watervale was last.
Yeah. So the story goes, we were playing Ballybunion, which is just spectacular. I mean, just a fantastic. It's in the middle of nowhere,
okay.
But a fantastic course. The back 9 is right on the Atlantic Ocean, and like I said, it's cliffs. I mean, you get too close to the ledge, it gets a little nerve wracking. But so we showed up. I was in a pair of slacks, and a golf shirt on the front 9. And then I'll let Shawn pick it up. But when we left JFK to fly over, I had mentioned this, that it was raining like crazy. There was a tropical storm that went up the East Coast of the United States. took a right turn, headed in the Atlantic. And on the back nine at Ballybunion, that, in my opinion, that same tropical storm made its way across the Atlantic and hit the east coast. The west coast of Ireland,
Gotcha.
which is where we were playing Ballybunion. And I'll let Shawn talk about the 10th tee box in the story as the story goes. But it was nasty. It was nasty.
Eddie, it's nasty, and you got golf pants and golf shirt on. Okay, all right. Now, Shawn, pick it up.
Okay, so it was. I think it was the 11th hole. Whatever hole it was, it ran parallel to the Atlantic Ocean. Brian, our brother Tom, and our nephew and I all hit our drives. Brian, Tom, and Neil walked off the tee box. They were probably 25 yards ahead of me. I was back on the tee box trying to light my cigar. And luckily, I did have a torch, so the wind wasn't too bad, and I could get my cigar lit. My caddy, oops, sorry. Wait a minute, hold on.
You're fine.
Okay.
Oh, we lost him.
Did we lose him?
I don't know. I think maybe he's back. I don't know what happened. You want to pick it back?
I can continue, but it's funnier coming from him because the joke's on me.
No, I know.
So anyway, it starts pouring rain, and not only is it raining, and I'm not a person that likes to embellish or exaggerate, but I'm saying it was 40 to 45 mile an hour winds. I picked up the story where it's raining and it's really windy.
No worries.
Yeah, so our caddy is looking out over the Atlantic Ocean, and he says, you might want to put your rain gear on. And I'm walking off the tee box smoking my cigar, and I said, okay. And he says, no, I mean now. So literally 45 seconds to a minute later, I had a warning. I had just enough time to get my rain gear on. Brian and Tom and Neil were completely caught off guard. I remember them trying to put their pants on, and the wind's blowing their pants, and their pants are way over their head. By the time they got their stuff on, it didn't matter because they were soaked. It was raining that hard. It was literally, like I said, you were standing in your shower, and it's raining sideways, like Brian said. And Brian and my brother Tom are big guys. They're both 6'6". And to tell you how hard it was raining, our nephew Neil videoed. He had the phone out. He's videoing. And I'm trying to hit my tee ball. And Tom and Brian are standing behind me, and they're leaning forward. That's how hard the wind was blowing. They're leaning forward so the wind wouldn't blow them over. It was nuts. So we went through 8 holes, call it 2 hours of torrential downpour, 45-mile-an-hour winds. It was a tough back 9. So we go to dinner that night, and me and my brother Tom are sitting on one side of the table and looking across at Brian, our father, our nephew Neil, and our sister. So Brian says, man, he says, that back 9 was incredible. He says, that weather was terrible. It was just really, really tough. He says, now I know what it feels like to scale Mount Everest or to be a Navy SEAL. And as soon as he said that, me and our brother Tom dropped our salad forks and looked at each other like, did he just say that? But he did. And I can give you Tom's phone number if you want verification. And as I was telling you, the funny story, it continued because our cousin Johnny really was a Navy SEAL in Vietnam. So my father, who lived in Florida, got back home and he told Johnny the story. So Johnny he's a trash talker and a prankster like all of the cousins.
Yep.
So Brian comes home from work one day and there's a message on his answering machine. So he answers it, and it's Johnny saying, "Hey Brian, this is your cousin Johnny." He says, "I heard you took a stroll in the rain and now you're a Navy SEAL." So Brian hasn't lived that story down. And yes, I embellish it and I blow it out of proportion, but it's just it's funnier every time you tell it.
Oh man, no, I actually had no, it landed because I was like, while you were saying it, I was like, we just told the story 45 minutes ago. Hopefully the juice is still there. But yeah, that's hilarious,
Oh
Brian.
yeah,
I gotta
it's
love it.
Yeah, it was one of those things, as soon as it comes out of your mouth, it's like, oh, give me that
Yeah,
back.
I
Give me
hear
that
you.
back. Didn't come out the way I meant it to, so.
I hear you,
well.
man.
What makes it worse is the three, and even our brother Neil. But Neil's down in South Carolina, and he's not quite. Neil's the reserved one of the brothers, but me and Brian and Tom are. I mean, any chance we get, we give each other a hard time. And
Uh-huh.
like I was telling you, our one friend, a friend of the family, he says his favorite part of playing golf with me and Brian and our brother Tom is he sits there and stands back and watches us give each other a bunch of crap for 18 holes. And that's pretty much what it is. It's
Yep.
nonstop giving each other a hard time.
That's the best part about golf. I mean, a lot of ways is the camaraderie. I mean, that's why people that they say they suck at golf, but like they get on the course.
Right.
When in their leisurely time, because it's a good. I don't know. There's just so many opportunities for good ribbage out there.
No, it's Brian will tell you I'm the one that I'm running my mouth most of the time. Brian and Tom just put up with me or ignore me or whatever. But I always say to Brian knows it, Tom knows it, my friends know it. I'm going to be talking trash. I don't care. I could be winning or losing. I'm going to give you a hard time. So that is definitely to me. That's why I enjoy golf. I mean, I have friends
He
that
talks
go
trash.
out
He talks trash if he's winning. If he's losing, everybody else playing knows about it.
Love it. I love
it.
So he didn't take that one too well.
No, I mean I do. I'm a sore loser, but I'll talk trash if I'm losing. To me, I'm going to give you a hard time. I don't care whether you're winning or losing. Like I said, in the Shannon grudge match, Brian and our cousin Neil have really taken me and Tom out to the woodshed the last 3 years. But that doesn't stop me from talking trash.
Oh, we live off that. My nephew Neil and I live off that, Brian. It's like, any kind of meme, any kind of text. It's just we have bragging rights and we take advantage of it. But the first year, my brother Shawn and Tom actually won the overall for the year. And, we had to listen to it. So
the funny thing is, the first grudge match ever was at Whiskey Creek up in Frederick.
That's a great course.
It is. Our nephew on the going into the 17th hole was 2 under par for the day. He ended up double bogey in that hole. He ended up shooting par. But me and my brother Tom won 17 out of the 18 holes. Brian and Neil won 1 hole because I shot a 75 and Tom shot a 76. And I took a picture of Brian and Neil standing on the 1 tee box that they won all day. And I like to circulate that to this day.
Okay. But there's a correction, Brian. They didn't win 17 holes because we did half some of them.
Oh, that's a lot of one-ups.
We did only win 1 hole, and they smoked us, but they didn't. It wasn't 17-1. The match wasn't over after 10 holes.
No, that's true. That is true. But they only won 1 hole. The Uno brothers.
That's what he's been living on for the last 6 years or whatever.
Now let me tell you a good story.
Got to get the fuel somewhere, Brian.
Brian, my friend Tony Seaman, I don't know if you knew Tony, but Tony was a head coach at Johns Hopkins, head coach at Towson University in lacrosse.
Okay.
And he's a great competitor. And Tony said the match, when he would play golf, he'd say the match is won or lost on the first tee box with how good of a negotiator you are. And that brings back the story of me and Tom had really dominated the series with Brian and our nephew Neil until we went to Kiowa. and Brian does not have an official handicap. And Brian and Neil cried their way to us relenting and giving Brian 31 strokes. 31 strokes. And Brian, that weekend, Brian played out of his mind. He played really well. So there was numerous double digits over the 3 days where he had 4 twos, 4 for 2, 5 for 3. So I was calling him Jackass Robinson for 42, but it was painful. That was the start of like 3 years of they have just creamed us.
Brian, I could see the confidence in your you just sat back all nice and chill on that one. I like that one.
I got an exorbitant amount of strokes, and I did play well down there. So it was not a close match, but I'm not getting 31 anymore. I get 19, and off of
Master
Shawn,
negotiator
is a 9 now. So, but it's fun. It's fun. I don't, like I said, I don't have a passion for it like Shawn. Shawn naturally always was a good golfer. So, the better you play in any sport, the more you're going to enjoy it.
Yep. I agree with that. All right. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you guys so much coming on here and telling your story. The back and forth was beautiful. If there's anybody you like to shout out, let us know.
Well, it was a lot of fun, Brian. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you, and I know you and Brian were talking about doing this. I appreciate being included, and I wish you the best of luck with your podcast.
Appreciate it.
And I'm gonna send the link to my nephew, partner Neil, and definitely to our brother Tom. And I had dinner with a really good friend tonight, and she said, "You send me that link. I told her I'm going to be on a podcast tonight." She's like, anyway, I didn't tell her about what, but I'll send JC the link, and a whole bunch of other people at work and so forth.
It was an honor for me to moderate your guys' trash talking to each other tonight, and we'll have to do it again sometime. Again, thank you guys so much, and everybody out there. I appreciate those who tuned in. For those who don't know, No Bull Sports is now on streaming on YouTube Live right now. You'll be able to check that out on YouTube through Drive It to the Top Productions up there in the right-hand corner. And also, you can find me on Twitter at No Bull Sports 10. And once again, everybody, thank you very much for tuning in. Next week, we will have my buddy Dante Tanner on, another great golfer buddy. I wouldn't say a great golfer, but we love to play, love to have fun, and just like these two gentlemen out there on the course. So thank you very much, guys. Take it easy.
Have a great night. Brian. Go O's.
Go A's.